Hello, welcome to Wyvern Minis. Now today I'm going to be tackling the sneakiest, gribbliest sneaky gribbly of all the gribbly sneakies, the Tyranid Lictor. Some weird amalgamation of xenomorph, predator, praying mantis, bit of Cthulhu thrown in there with the tentacles. The Lictor has been a fascinating model to me for a long time, and I've got the new plastic one here. But we're going to do Lictor Three Ways, as the title suggests. Now, that could be 3 ways, because there are now 3 different types of Lictor you can take. Death Leaper, which is a reworked model of a previous special character, the regular Lictor, and the newer Lictor. But no, we're not going to do that. It could be Lictor Three Ways, because you can actually pose this Lictor in 3 different ways. Games Workshop have now started doing a lot more variations in their posing again, which I think is a fantastic thing. So it'd be really cool to do different poses of the Lictor. But no, we're not going to do that either. What we have is the Lictor in the new plastic kit. We've got this Lictor that I converted a long time ago from a Broodlord. I had 2 Broodlords because I got one in a set with the Genestealer Cults. Decided I didn't need to have 2, so I would use some bits to convert one into either Death Leaper or a regular Lictor. I'm going to use it as a regular Lictor, but it needs a little bit of a spruce up because I converted it a long time ago. It needs a bit of attention to it before painting it up. And finally, we've got this absolute gem, the classic old metal Lictor, which I got off eBay some time ago. So I'm going to have 3 very distinct looking Lictors in my army, which is very exciting. Going to see if I can get my conversion and the old metal one to look just as good as the new plastic one. So let's see how I get on. So I will start off with assembling the new plastic Lictor, because I was quite excited to get this out of the box. I would say it's important to read the instructions first. It's a little bit involved. I think some of the new Games Workshop kits, they've really gone for extra complexity in there, which sometimes is a bit difficult to get your head around. Certainly means that just cutting all the bits out and sticking them together doesn't work so well. However, the instructions are pretty clear here. I know in the past people have criticised the Games Workshop instructions for being pretty vague, but I thought the instructions for this kit were very good. It's very clever how they've made it, the way that you can pose the different arms, especially the big mantis claws on top. Use basically the same claws with different hinges in them to determine whether they're open or closed, and they can be positioned in different places. So you don't end up with lots and lots of extra pieces from this kit. It's just the way that the pieces go together is slightly differently, which is pretty clever, really, I thought. It was nice to put together. A few little fiddly bits, like the toe claws in particular, they were pretty small and fiddly to get done, and you certainly want to just clip out the ones that you need at the time, so you don't get confused about which one's which, I think. I'd also say that the kit is really nicely laid out on the sprue, and that was one thing with some of the newer kits I found. They started to make them a lot more complicated, and things were just randomly distributed across the sprue. The Orc Commandos are my sort of go-to example for that, where you had bits from all over the place to make a single model, which was very confusing, I thought. But with this Lictor, they've done a great job of making it all laid out in a kind of logical way. The instructions are good. It's a really quite a nice kit to put together, very enjoyable. I spent quite a bit of time trying to decide what pose to do with it. Eventually went for one that was kind of stalking forwards, a bit crouched down, but with the claws up in the air, ready to strike. I thought that looked pretty cool. I'm quite tempted to get another one just to be able to try one of the other poses, and there's a different face as well you can put on it. It seems like you can also interchange the faces. The pose doesn't matter in terms of which face you use and all that kind of stuff. And you could, I think you could mix and match a little bit more as well. You know, you could kind of have the mantis claws up when it's crouching down, or have them down when it's standing up, or whatever, you know. There's certainly a bit of changing around the arms as well that you could do if you were so inclined. So there's definitely some good options there, I reckon. But I was pretty happy with this one, and I was sort of thinking about how it would look next to the other two that I'm putting together. I mean, getting another Lictor now is a little redundant because you can only have 3 in an army because of the limitations on data sheets. But yeah, it was such a fun model to put together. It does feel like maybe one day when I've got them all painted, going nuts. But yeah, so I think I was pretty happy with that. I think it looks nice, so I thought that's great. I'll move on to the next one. With the new plastic Lictor all assembled and looking nice, I moved on to the old metal model that I got off eBay. This was in pretty good condition, really. Even the box was nice. There was a couple of extra bits of Hormigaunt, I think, in there, which didn't need. I might keep them for something else, but put them to one side anyway. The only thing that needed doing was clearing out some super glue from inside the lug holes, which was all dried on and hard, so I needed a bit of work with a metal scraper and a knife to get that out. But obviously that's important because you need to make sure you've got a nice flush connection so that the whole thing doesn't have gaps in it or whatever, and to make sure it can stick together. The plan is to pin it because it is quite a heavy bit of metal, and even when you're pinning it, you still need to make sure you've got rid of the old glue that was in there in the first place. So that took a little bit of scraping and elbow grease, but that all came out all right. So then I was thinking, how am I going to make this Lictor stand out? It's a little bit smaller than the new plastic one, not that much. The scale creep between the editions in terms of a Lictor isn't as much as it has been in some of the other Games Workshop models, but I wanted to do something to make this metal one stand out and look cool, some sort of scenic base. And my normal go-to with something like that is probably going to be a Dead Space Marine, because beakies as casualties is always satisfying, and annoys all the other Space Marine players down at the club. But I thought, for a bit of a change, maybe a Imperial Guard, perhaps some crates, dead Imperial Guardsman or two. Maybe this Lictor has infiltrated a supply depot, and killed the guards. That seems very Lictor-y to me. So it could look quite cool, and also you've got the opportunity for the Lictor to stand on the crates and gives it a little bit more height. I mean, it doesn't need too much more height because of those big mantis claws, but compared to the other Lictors, it will just make it stand out a little bit more. So I got the 3D files. I found some good-looking 40k crates and some dead guardsmen. Downloaded those, reduced the crate size a little bit so they're going to fit on a 50mm base a bit better, and printed them out on my Elegoo Mars 3 Pro, which is still quite new to me, but it's working really well. It's a fantastic machine. Got them all washed in the isopropyl alcohol and then cured in a curing station, which it's all pretty easy and really nice to use. I've got a couple of other Tyranid bits there which you might spot, which I'm going to be doing a future video on, because I had a couple of things I wanted to do, but I'm going to keep quiet about them for the moment and be all mysterious, and then do a video shortly. So anyway, I got the crates. They fitted nicely on a 50mm base, as you can see there, with a dead guardsman on there, and I figured that was going to be a nice platform for the Lictor to stand on. So then it was a case of just assembling the model, making sure I was pinning it nicely. I've got a Dremel tool which I use. I've got it's got an attachment for a smaller kind of handheld bit, so you drive it from the main body of the tool, which is quite big and bulky, and use a smaller attachment. I also control it with a foot pedal, so I don't have to keep pressing the button on and off, and that makes it really quick and easy. I would say for these sort of old metal models, trying to drill into them with a handheld pin vise is a bit laborious, whereas the Dremel tool just goes straight in, no problem. And I've got this pinning wire which is quite flexible but very strong, so it's just a case of drilling the hole to a suitable depth, sticking one end of the wire in with a bit of glue, cutting the other end, and then putting it on. I tend to eyeball where the holes need to go, which sometimes doesn't pan out too well, but because I've done it quite a lot, normally it's fine. I think if you want to be really ultra careful, the sort of more sensible thing to do might be to put a little dot of paint on the pin, so that you can work out where your other hole needs to go on the other side of the model. I didn't do it here, and it worked out perfectly. So that's me being quite good at guessing where the holes need to be. Sometimes with the metal models, and sometimes with resin as well, you can, if you push quite hard, you can get a little indentation of the pin on the other side. So you can see here with this model, I haven't had to look at the instructions. It's much more simple to put together than the plastic one. Now, I'm not going to sit here and start bashing new models and saying all models are better or anything like that. I'm just going to say that there's a difference between them. The new plastic kits, and they end up looking great, but they are that much more complicated. As I said, you need to really read the instructions on that plastic Lictor to make sure you're putting it together correctly. Whereas with this metal model, it's a lot more simple to have a look at the picture, and then it's quite obvious where things go. It's made up of far fewer pieces. The different skill involved in drilling holes and pinning it and all that kind of stuff is very important. So that is where perhaps the difficulty with working with a metal model comes in. But I think the end result is great either way. I'm not having a go at new models or anything like that, because I do really like that new model. But I love this model as well, and they both have their place. I think it's interesting, and there are quite a few companies who are still producing high quality metal models. People like Heresy Miniatures and Hassle Free and things like that. And I think it's just a different sort of way of modelling, and it's quite nice ending up with a hefty metal chunk. It feels nice moving around the table. So I spent quite a bit of time mucking about with the crates on the base. I had printed out some extra crates and some extra casualties as well. You can never have too many dead guardsmen. So I was kind of hoping I'd get a couple of dead bodies on the base and the crates, and kind of be able to make a really nice looking mini diorama, but it just didn't quite pan out. On the 50mm base, there's just not quite enough space for it, especially with the sort of stance that the Lictor has with its 2 feet. I wanted to have the 2 crates there so it was standing between them. But that's okay. I've got more dead guardsmen to put on another base somewhere, so that's all good. And I really like this guy sort of leaning up against the crates there. It just looks quite like a natural pose. And once it's all painted and I've slapped a load of sort of blood paint all over it, I think it will look lovely. So I did a lot of dry fitting with the legs to try and make them fit. Before I glued it all, wanted to really make sure I knew exactly where I was going to drill the holes. I used the longer drill bit to make sure I could get a really long hole into the crates to really give some good stability to the Lictor's legs. But as I was dry fitting it, I figured that the lugs that were already moulded into the legs and the holes in the hips were probably more than adequate to keep it in place. So I decided not to pin the legs into the body, which made it substantially easier to put together. But yeah, it was a fair bit of fiddling about and trying to make sure that it fitted just right. And I think I had to redo one of the holes in the crates because it ended up not being in quite the right place after I'd tried to get it there. But that's okay, I can cover that with a little bit of liquid green stuff or something. Yeah, bit of fiddling about, lots of dry fitting before applying the glue, because once the glue's on, that's kind of game over in terms of mucking about anymore. Yeah, I was really pleased with the pose in the end. Managed to get it looking just how I wanted, and actually the stability of the model was surprisingly good, because the center, where the center of gravity is, it was bang in the middle of the base. So although he's very heavy on the top, he wasn't tipping over too easily. I did end up using an extra metal base underneath. It was a spare metal base that I had from a North Star figure, North Star Demon, because they supplied a small rectangular metal base with it, and I used a different base. So I found that actually fitted very nicely under the 50mm base, so I stuck that on, and it was just something I had. If I hadn't had that, I would have used a penny or a 2p piece or something, just to give an extra bit of weight underneath, or a washer, any sort of old bit of metal or whatever you've got, just to give a bit of extra weight on the bottom of the base and make it less likely to tip over, because obviously you've got quite a lot of metal rising quite high up. But yeah, I think really pleased with how this old model came out. Really looking forward to getting some paint on it, and I think it will stand up really well next to the new model. You know, size wise they're not too far off one another. I mean, I am aware if I got a couple more of these old metal Lictors, I reckon you could use them as a lot of Von Ryan's Leapers. They're also not too far off the size of those new models, so you could make a unit of those out of these. Either way, I think they work really, really nicely, and I like having a mixture of old and new models in my armies. I think it's something that ends up happening in my armies anyway, because I've been collecting for a long time. But I think if you kind of make a thing out of it, it's quite cool, and people always see the old models and think, yeah, I remember seeing that. Or if they're new to the hobby, they'll ask you about it because they don't recognise it, and you can tell them a long, boring story about when I was young, I had these metal models and they were much different to put together than the new plastic ones. Anyway, there he is. Yeah, chuffed to bits. And so I was going to go and look at the conversion that I did from the old Broodlord. So this old conversion I did, I was very proud of this. It was quite a few years ago I did this conversion, before there was a plastic Lictor. There was the Finecast one available, but I wasn't going to buy a Finecast one. Not a fan of Finecast stuff that Games Workshop produced. I'd rather just have the old metal ones or the new plastic ones. That was a dark period. Anyway, I did this conversion using a Broodlord because I didn't think I needed to have another Broodlord in my army. I've got a Genestealer Cults army as well, and I had a Patriarch from that, which I think looks like a cooler Broodlord. It's pretty much the same model, very close to it, very slightly smaller, but looks very cool. So I figured, a Patriarch is a Broodlord, so I'll have him doing double duty between the two armies, and I can convert this other Broodlord up into a Lictor, which I used some big Carnifex claws to do that, the Carnifex scything talons, carved them down a little bit, and then to get rid of the sort of sharp edge, and then put some spikes on it, and I think that looks really cool. But those Mantis claws are therefore substantially bigger on this Lictor compared to the other two, so yeah, he's a big boy compared to the other two Lictors I've got. I think that works okay. The only problem is with the base. So my intention was to put him on a 50mm base, the same as the other two Lictors, but the way that the model is, the way it's standing on that bit of alien ground that's poking up, it's just not really going to work. It's leaning forwards too much. It's going to be falling off the 50mm base. I don't know what I'd have to do to make it work. I think maybe if he was standing on the back of that bit of growth, it would work, but I think trying to carve him off it and then sticking back on it's just going to cause more harm than good. Ultimately, the decision I've made is to leave him on this base. Rule of cool, he looks cool. I can stick a dead body or two on there. Might go for a dead orc on this one just to spice things up a little bit. But yeah, I think obviously when you're playing a tournament or a Games Workshop store event or whatever, you have to use the right base sizes. But I think I don't think it's going to make a huge difference in a game really to have this very slightly different base size. So I'm going to stick with it. And when you're playing casual games, most people don't really mind. I mean, Games Workshop themselves have caused base issues in the past. The Carnifex models, some of them came on round bases and some of them are oval bases. And the Broodlord itself, as I say, I've got a Broodlord and a Patriarch. The Patriarch technically should be on a 50mm round base, I believe, whereas the Broodlord came on this oval base. I mean, they're pretty much the same model, really. And I've ended up sticking my one on one of the oval bases because I'm using it as a broodlord primarily. Again, I don't think anyone's going to mind about that, and it will look far better on the oval base rather than sort of uncertain 50mm base where it might fall off. So, and you know, you never know. The next edition, Games Workshop might update all the base sizes again as they've done in the past. So, I mean, I think there's a balance to be struck between doing something that looks good and is sort of easy to do versus kind of trying to do it perfectly for the current meta in the game or whatever. And you know, so I think I'm quite comfortable with this decision to keep it on the wrong base and make sure it looks nice. Yeah, I've done that with a few other models in my collection. As far as possible, try to make it all tournament legal and proper. But if it's not going to be, I don't think it's the end of the world. So that's my 3 Lictors all assembled. This video ended up being a bit longer than I intended. So I will get a little bit of green stuff on that converted Lictor. I used them all in a game just the other day, which was quite good having 3 Lictors on the table running around causing trouble. Yeah, I will be getting these painted up very shortly, and I've got a lot of other Tyranid bits and pieces to talk about. So you know, subscribe to the channel, come back for those videos, and I'll be seeing you soon with some more more painting stuff, from Tyranids to Orcs and HeroQuest and whatever. So hope to see you soon. Thanks. Bye.